Take it away, Jen.
Great, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Just want to make sure you can see my screen. I'm assuming so. Thank you for joining me. I hope you are ready to hear and talk about service design and how UX research can be applied to enterprise software and services. So let's go ahead and get started. Very briefly, I'll tell you about me. I'm a user experience researcher at BECU, which is one of the largest credit unions in the United States. I've worked in a number of industries from finance to cloud computing and medical field. I'm also one of the co-founders of UX Research and Strategy. So if that group interests you, either connect with the group or myself on LinkedIn. And I have a little bit of a warning. I have a lot of doggos in my presentation, so I hope you're a fan of dogs. All right, so let's start with the basics. What is enterprise software? And no, it's not this spaceship for all you Star Trek fans out here. Enterprise software is used to satisfy the needs of an organization or company rather than individual users. So what makes enterprise systems interesting is they're not super sexy or delightful to work on for the most part. They are here to help you get a job done. So people tend to be on them for really long periods of time. So think about someone who is managing content for a website and using some sort of content management system. They're likely in that system all day long. And also this type of software feels a little old-fashioned and dated. And a lot of times its functionality is tied to legacy systems, which also makes it feel old and ancient. So the tough part about enterprise software is the users often don't have much say in the purchase of these products. So the person who bought the software is likely not going to be the same person using it on a daily basis. So the person who bought it is probably in procurement or technology, and they made the decision. And so sometimes our hands are tied when we have to use enterprise software. And to be honest, this kind of software rarely gets a lot of UX love. Simply put, companies they need these solutions and a great user experience that the person desires when they're working. It's often neglected when it comes to enterprise. So traditional enterprise software is often, like I said, used internally by a company, by a specific user or group, and generally not consumer facing. So some examples of enterprise software you might be familiar with, maybe you work in these too: Jira, Salesforce, Zoho, WordPress. And they can manage a number of functionality like human resources, payroll, customer relationship management, marketing, software as a service. It's all kinds of industries and all kinds of solutions. So now that we know what some examples of enterprise software are, let me share some enterprise software that I was working on. So I was trying to bring this security application that I'm going to show you into this century. Now, I have a word of caution. This next thing I'm going to show you, it might hurt your eyes a little bit. So you have been warned. Here is some of the lovely enterprise software I was working on while a UX designer and researcher at a security company. Don't you just love the way that this looks? I'm a big fan of the red and blue text juxtaposition here. Ugh. Overall, it looks like it was created in what, 1993? So here's another example of that security operations center, the software that analysts used every day when creating and reviewing security tickets. The company I worked for monitored internet traffic for other corporations. They looked for bad things on that company's system, like malware, viruses, security threats. Oh, imagine looking at these small fonts and this dated design for hours on end. Pretty brutal. And see all of these buttons at the top left, these gray long boxes? Well, through my research, I found out that only half of them are even functional. And most of them weren't even usable in the flow or the context of the screen that they were on. This is a classic example of adding more items without removing the items that are not useful or required anymore. I'm sure some of you have seen this. Okay, whew. So last time I'm going to scare you with that dated enterprise software. And it's kind of funny. I've been at the company for a while, and I talked to one of my former coworkers recently, a few months ago, and they said, "We're still using that same old school design." Mm. So that brings us to the other half of this talk, service design. So maybe some of you are familiar with service design, and maybe you're even practicing it in your organization. So for those who are a little maybe less familiar with it, let's define it. Service design is a way of organizing resources, people, and processes in order to improve the employee's experience and then indirectly the customer's experience. So to me, it's taking a deep look at the experience your user or your customer is going through each step of the way, then determining if there are ways to improve that experience even more. So let's look at some similarities between service design and enterprise software. So I just stated service design is a way of organizing a business process to improve the employee's experience and then indirectly the customer's experience. Well, enterprise software also has that secondary user, helping the business's needs and not necessarily helping the individual who's using the software directly. So enterprise software is often purchased by those, like I said, holding the purse strings, but not necessarily using it all the time. So there's some interesting parallel between service design and enterprise software. They both indirectly affect another person or aspect, be that a company or a customer. So that means there's a lot of opportunity to improve the customer experience by examining how enterprise software is used in companies. So how is this done? Well, one way is through a service design blueprint. So not sure if anybody here is familiar with a service design blueprint, but let me explain it. So the rows going across horizontally, the swim lanes, as they're known, are what we can examine a customer's interaction with the product or service. So that's what we're looking at. Now the columns, the vertical columns, are the steps in a process. So we can look at a customer's journey through their touch points with our company by going through the different rows. So this is a service design blueprint framework from Adaptive Path. And I just want to show you the concept. We're going to go a little bit more into it later. Just wanted you to see what it looks like. So let's dive into the case study a little bit. What problem was I trying to solve? So the business ask was to automate making reports. Again, this project was at a company that monitors another corporation's internet traffic and warns them of issues and threats happening on their network. So like if there's a virus on their network or if an employee is downloading something illegally. So as part of that service, the security company I worked for would deliver a summary or report of their network activity and the problems that they had, either on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis. So we built these reports. And again, the ask was by my company was to automate making these reports. Okay. So before I go into that, look at some of the flashy graphics that were in this report. Super fancy. I'll talk about this a little bit more. I just wanted to give you a little taste. So what's wrong with these reports? Well, it is a very manual process to make these reports, hence why they wanted to automate it. It takes a person nearly 2 hours to make just one report. And building reports like this manually, it just doesn't scale. Also, the information to build these reports came from multiple sources. And based on the interviews that I conducted with clients who view the reports, These reports didn't provide the information that the client really wants and needs. Plus, the design and the presentation, oh, it's all over the place. It was not visually consistent at all. So I asked myself, what methods can I use to investigate how to build a better report for our clients? And that's when I decided to let service design come to the rescue. So the first thing I did was come up with a plan of attack, which was my research plan. First, I wanted to conduct a heuristic evaluation. And that was to look at the reports to see what design and usability problems the report has. You can conduct a heuristic evaluation on things that are not digital too. You don't just have to do them on an interface or an app. Then I had to get the customer's point of view. Part of the problem of this report that they were building out is they never asked the customers what they needed in these reports. That's a big no-no. We want to meet customers' needs, right? We want to have a user-centered approach to problem solving. So I interviewed customers to better understand what they wanted and needed from reports. Then I needed to figure out how these reports were actually put together. So I used the classic anthropology approach of contextual inquiry. Sometimes it's called ethnographic observation. Sometimes it's called side-by-sides. I'll go into that a bit more. And then I decided I was going to use a service design blueprint with a little bit of a twist to do a deep dive examination of how these reports were put together. And finally, through the research I was conducting, I hoped that I would discover gaps and opportunities which would lead to my recommendations for improvement. So that was my overall plan of attack, my research plan. Now, I want to take a deeper dive into each step I did for conducting the research to build out a service design blueprint for enterprise systems. So in this example, remember, service design is the process of improving an employee's experience and then indirectly improving the customer's experience. So in order to satisfy the customer, I had to take a multi-method approach to better understand the problem I was trying to solve, which was build better reports for clients. So first, I need to understand the report itself. What's going on in this report? So I conducted a heuristic evaluation. Second, I need to know how the report was built and conducted a contextual inquiry to understand that. And then third, know what customers wanted and needed from a report. And that was user interviews. So as I mentioned before, these are all part of my plan, my research plan, my plan of attack. And bringing all the knowledge from these different approaches and methodologies, I would come up with recommendations to improve the report. And hopefully that would lead to happy customers. So first I had to understand what was going on in this report. So I started with, like I said, a heuristic evaluation to examine what's going on in the report now. I wasn't pulling up Nielsen's 10 heuristics or some of the other heuristics. I was just doing a quick and dirty examination of the status quo, looking for inconsistencies, what could be confusing, what's going on here. And I'm going to be honest, the developers in the Security Operations Center, these people are really technical. They know their stuff. And these were the people who were building out the reports. And you know what? They may not be the most empathetic designers. Yes, subject matter experts for sure. Communicating things in a simple and easy way, not so much. So I had to look at these reports to see if a dumb person like myself could understand what was going on. Guess what the verdict was? No, I could not. So back to those lovely graphics I showed you earlier. Let's take a closer look at these charts and talk about some opportunities for improvement. First, the top left, the chart that's titled Top Alert Categories. Ooh, look at the red and the black and the yellow 3D charts. Ooh, they're so hard to read, really. They're so far away from the number scale. So the number scales anywhere from 0 to 30,000. Well, that's a huge difference. Another problem with this 3D chart is what if the pillars in the front are higher than the ones in the back? It may not be the case on this chart really, but it could happen. And then you might not be able to see the things in the back. So not a good approach. Now, let's look at the top right, this lovely gray and white table. So this table shows IP addresses without any context, any reference, just a list of IP addresses. Okay, it does have some device names, but it would take a real expert to know the differences in these devices because they all have really similar names. So when I talked to a client about this chart, they felt like it wasn't really useful. It just reported the status quo. They wanted to know about the devices. They wanted to know, is there a problem? If there's a problem, what is the problem? So showing the status quo and not in-depth problems wasn't really useful. So this chart wasn't helpful for our clients. Now let's go down to the bottom left. So this chart shows how many incidents, problems, how many tickets, basically, the emails that we sent to that client a month. Who cares? The clients don't care how many emails we sent them a month. They're not concerned about this. They want to know the content of those emails. Were there problems that were being reported? Were there trends or themes? More important than how many we sent them. Now, the bottom right, this blue chart, this is my favorite. This chart shows how long it took to resolve or close a ticket. So the y-axis going up and down the side shows the number of tickets. It goes from 0 to 3, and it includes half numbers. Well, trust me when I say it is not possible to have a half of a ticket. You either have a ticket or you don't. So there's no need for half increments. And the x-axis along the bottom shows how long the ticket was open in seconds. Seconds, not hours or minutes. So look here at this chart. The maximum is 28,619 seconds. Let's translate that into something people might actually understand. 28,619 seconds is 477 minutes, and it's nearly 8 hours. Well, that makes a little more sense. No one wants to have to translate seconds into hours. Just not a good experience. So based on my heuristic evaluation and later from interviews with customers who viewed these charts, I found all kinds of goodies that needed to be fixed. So I also talked with the people who received the reports. Through one-on-one interviews, I asked them simply, what do you need? And I learned that these reports were not delivering what the clients needed. They told me about how basically they needed actionable items to take to their boss. One person said, if we are in trouble, I don't want to know that there is a problem. I want to know what to do about it. They want the report to be reflective of industry trends and concerns too. Are there things happening in the world right now? Are there current problems that I should be aware of or keep an eye out for? Give them the context or interpretation. Don't just tell them there is a problem. Tell them why it's happening and what to do about it. They also wanted things to be personalized. There are sections of the report that show generic stories and industry-related articles. These reports had zero info that was useful or helpful to the company or industry. And the clients didn't like these generic reports at all. So finally, they wanted info that was useful. And simply put, these reports did not have it. Okay, so now we have a better understanding of what users want. But remember, the original ask from the company of me was to streamline and automate making this report. Well, in order to do that, I have to understand how these reports are made. But That is why I did a contextual inquiry. Basically, I'm sitting with someone and observing what they're doing and asking them questions. And the person I sat with, there was mainly one person who built reports, and his nickname was Bro Sales. So I'll call him Bro Sales. He walked me through every step of the process, and he answered all of my questions. And this is why I love this method, because you get to observe people who do things they don't even realize what they're doing sometimes. Trust me, people do things and their actions are so routine, they don't even realize that they're doing them. But if you observe them doing things, then you can notice the actions that they take that they might not tell you. Plus, you get to see their cheat sheets, their notes, their hacks, the things that guide them to help them get their work done. You can also ask questions along the way. So what I learned through observation was it surfaced that the process is super manual, and therefore that can introduce human error. It helped me to understand the user flow. I learned how long it took, the software, websites, and systems that were involved, and again, the errors that could occur by interacting with all those. While I sat with Bro Sales, I watched him build out a report. I could also have him take screenshots of what he was working on so I could see what he was doing. And he can explain everything that he did step by step. And by having this information, it would help me later in creating that service design blueprint. So the first thing I noticed during this contextual inquiry is there were a lot of systems required to build out this report. Multiple websites and touch points. Not to mention the calculations and the scripts that Bro Sales had to run to determine the data that goes into the reports. It was a lot. And Bro Sales, the person I sat with, he didn't even realize he had to use so many systems. Again, that's the real value of sitting with someone and watching them do their work. You see them things they're barely aware of doing themselves. So after seeing all these systems, I realized that automating the reports, it was going to be a bit of a challenge. So after my observations, I went back to my desk and I roughly mapped out the steps in the process and the applications associated with that step. Now, you see, I had this tiny little whiteboard. It's really this big, and that's it. I had very limited space. I did not have a digital whiteboard to map this out. So I just wanted to get this out of my head and onto paper in a sense, right? And, it's kind of helpful not to go digital and high res too quickly, as I can make edits in this whiteboard face really easy. Just erase and fix. So this little sketch, in a sense, indicated the major steps in the system or the software involved in that step. And this was a great rough draft and a reference point for when I was going to build out this service design blueprint. So let's talk about that service design blueprint for a second. Like I said on the previous slide, I had this little tiny whiteboard, so I wasn't able to build this on a whiteboard. It was just too much to go into detail, so I went big. And when I say I went big, I mean it. This service design blueprint wrapped around 5 cubicles in the office. I had those flip charts, the big Post-it paper, and then Post-it notes on that. And then I took screenshots and put them on there too. Let me tell you, going big like this, it had a few advantages. It provided visibility into the process. Now everyone could see what that UX researcher had been up to all this time. It also gave me the opportunity to review this with Bro Sales. I can confirm that the flow was accurate, and it really brought to life all the jumps and steps that are involved in creating a report, and it surfaced the areas of improvement. Having a large format like this, it actually created some visual interest in the project. People who weren't even involved were like, oh, hey, what's going on over there? And it started to bring others into the conversation and created some excitement. So remember that service design blueprint I showed you earlier? Each long box across the top is an interaction or step in the flow. That's the gold boxes here. And so this is what a traditional service design blueprint looks like. They have these swim lanes, customer actions, the touch points, the staff actions. Those are the points that the user or the customer interacts with. And then you have this below the line. And what's happening under there is what the user doesn't see. There are systems, that's usually the technology, that are processing things at these steps. And there might even be people who are involved in processing that step as well. And so for this project, though, I'll admit I took a little bit of a different approach. I didn't use this exact framework with these exact swim lane labels. And I think the beauty of this framework is that it is flexible and it can be adjusted. So I want to walk through a non-enterprise example where a service design blueprint model could be used. Let's say you're designing a theme park. How cool would that be, huh? And you want to create the best experience possible. So you can modify a service design blueprint to map out what an experience would be for a user of the theme park. And you can do so through a persona. So let's do that. So let's look at this through the lens of this specific persona. So we have a group of people who have an elderly family member with them who have mobility issues, and they're coming to the theme park. So some criteria for this is they may not ride all the rides. They may need more frequent breaks because they're elderly. They may have different needs, like accommodations for wheelchairs or special dietary needs. So for this example, I created some new swim lanes. We still have the customer touch point, but it's in a theme park. It's the attraction rather than the steps of going through something like, say, digital. So the orange lane, the second one down, are the services provided at that attraction. And then the cyan color are the direct employee interactions, how that user persona would interact with an employee. And then I thought it was really good for the team to explore the pros or the positive or the good aspects of that attraction. And then the flip side of that, what are the cons or maybe the negative aspects of that attraction for this persona? And then wrap it up with how might we? A brainstorming row where we could come up with opportunities to improve this experience at this attraction. And thinking about what does this persona need at each of these places? So for this example, this is Sci-Fi Land. This is one aspect, and Sci-Fi Land has different things. They have rides, they have a restroom, they have restaurants, they have a gift shop, and these are the gold boxes. These are the different attractions that are within Sci-Fi Land. And I want to walk through an example of what this might look like with this persona. Again, so the persona is a group of people who have an elderly person who might have some mobility issues. And normally you would do this for all the touch points, but for the sake of time, we're going to keep it simple and just talk about one touch point, which is the extraterrestrial burger stand. So this is a restaurant. What are some of the aspects we should think about when we're designing a theme park for this persona at this attraction? So again, the persona is a group of people with an elderly person who has some mobility issues. So let's think about the needs of this person, this persona in this attraction, which is a restaurant. So how this could cater to this persona. So the services that we could offer. Well, elderly person, their eyesight might not be as strong as it once was. So maybe large print menus might be helpful for them. Also, low glycemic foods or other foods that have special dietary needs and restrictions. So for the employee interaction, what might an employee do at an attraction like this for this persona? Well, it might be helpful for them to know how to do CPR and other emergency services in case somebody has a heart attack. It might be helpful for them to have upper body strength in case they need to pick somebody up who's fallen down. Now let's talk about some of the good things that could be happening at this attraction. We could offer free water. Rather than charging $4 for a bottle of water, we could offer free water so that in case somebody needs to take some medication throughout the day. We could also offer seating in case they need to cool down because they've been out of the theme park all day. A lot of times it's hot. You come inside to get some air conditioning and you just need to rest. So maybe offer seating that isn't tied to specifically to eating at a table. And what are some bad things or negative aspects that could be happening at this attraction? Well, if you have tall seats, those bar height seats, those would be really challenging for someone with mobility issues to get into. Also, if the tables and chairs were very close together, that could be very difficult for someone with a wheelchair to maneuver their way through the restaurant. So then our team could brainstorm some opportunities and some how might we statements on how we could improve this attraction. So this is something I want to emphasize again when it comes to a service design blueprint. It is okay to modify the swim lanes or the rows to examine the things that are really important for your team to solve. For my theme park example, it wasn't important for us to explore those behind the scenes technical aspects. We were focusing on the customer experience. We didn't need to know the support systems involved. And so that's what's really great about this service design blueprint. You can modify it to focus on what's important for your team. And that is exactly what I did when it came to building a report and using a service design blueprint. So let's switch gears and go back to that. Yeah. So modifying the service design blueprint and the process. Let's take a look at the swim lanes I created for this service design blueprint when it comes to building out a report. So the top row, the yellow boxes are the actions. These are the steps that are part of building the report. The orange stickies were my observations. So these are the things I wanted to capture, but they may not be the exact steps. Just some additional things I noted during the contextual inquiry. Now the pink ones are my notes and my comments. So these are my editorial kind of comments. I'm noting gaps, opportunities, things I want them to be separate because this is my opinion and me kind of thinking my how might we's, and I want those to be different than actual observed behaviors and activities. These are things like maybe I want to fix. And then I also had the screenshot so that everybody could see exactly what was shown on the screen during these steps. And it's a little difficult to see, but there's a little square on a lot of them, little colored box. That is the software or the system that was involved in each of those steps. So this is how I kind of modified the service design blueprint to examine what was really important to building out this report for the team. So once I got this all mapped, remember I said I had it around 5 cubicles in the office, no joke. Then it was time to review it with the team. So first I showed it to Bro Sales. He was the person that built most of the reports, and I wanted to confirm that the flow was accurate. So what was really astounding was mapping it out like this really brought to life just how many steps and jumps are involved in building this report. And notice it's still not high resolution, and that's because it's easier to fix errors early in the stage. And I had to do that a bit. I had some things kind of mixed up and out of order, and Bro Sales put me in the right direction. And it's really easy to do that when you have stickies. You just have to move things around. Also, having it low res it's a great way to start conversations. Having it big like this, I have the developers coming around. They were starting to understand the process because in theory, the developers were going to have to help automate this process. So they needed to know what was going on. So having this big presentation was great to surface the gaps and opportunities, start having those conversations, thinking about what technical improvements could be made. And Honestly, this was the first time managers had any visibility into this process. And it was really critical for them to understand the complexity involved in making this report. If they had not seen how many steps were involved and how many systems were involved, they probably would still think it was just like easy to automate, flip a switch, and you're done. But once they saw how complicated this process was, kind of put a hold on that automation process. So once the process and the stickies were all confirmed and accurate, I then got a little bit higher resolution and put it into a spreadsheet. Now I know what you're thinking. Ugh, Jen, a spreadsheet? Ew. You could have put in some fancy design software like Figma and made it look really nice and created this really cool digital version that could knock their socks off. Yeah, I could have. But I decided to make this spreadsheet to meet the team where they are. I made a spreadsheet because that's what stakeholders in the team are comfortable with. The good old-fashioned Excel document or Google spreadsheets, it's not pretty, but it's functional. The file size is really small and it's easy to share. So form follows function, my dear friends. I just want to know here that the colors correspond to the original service design blueprint. So the yellow stickies became yellow cells on this spreadsheet. So it was pretty easy to translate the stickies into this digital format. And though it was a little bit heartbreaking to take down that paper version of the service design blueprint, that work of art that was spanning all those cubicles, if this digital version was much more accessible, anybody could open it on their computer and take a look at it at their desk at any time. And you know what? It also kept people from coming over and bugging me and asking me questions about it. They could look at it anytime on their own computer. It was great. So this was the final deliverable. And this was the document that managers used to make decisions about the project and how they were going to automate making reports. And in the end, they decided they could not fully automate making this report. But there were some opportunities to streamline and improve some things, but there were just too many systems and steps and data points involved to just flip a switch and be done with it. But it was a huge win for the team, especially for Bro Sales, who's building these reports, to surface just how many steps it took and to see where improvements could be made. So I want to revisit my plan of attack, or my research plan, and talk about how the different research efforts I conducted helped the team come to a decision. So I created a heuristic evaluation. Again, looked at the report to see what design and usability problems the report has. I uncovered customer needs through one-on-one interviews. I conducted a contextual inquiry with Bro Sales by observing him building a report and asking him questions. And this helped me to understand how the reports were built. And finally, all the data I collected along the way laid out to build out that service design blueprint. Through the research, I discovered gaps and opportunities, which did lead to my recommendations for improvement. So as you can see, a mixed method approach can be a really terrific way, ultimately, to construct a service design blueprint. So after examining the process, it was then time to share my recommendations. We discussed where things could be automated and consolidated. And based on the heuristic evaluation I did, I suggested ways to improve the report visually and make it consistent. And from the interviews and learning what users wanted from the report, I gave suggestions on different and new content opportunities and how to present data in helpful ways in actionable ways that our customers could use. And my hope was that we would be iterating on this report. We would revise it, get continuous customer feedback, and figure out how we could continue to make this better for them. So the beauty of a service design blueprint is you get that holistic view of the process to surface gaps and opportunities. It showed the challenges of automation. It was not going to be an easy fix, like just flipping a switch like managers thought it was going to be. It also included the cross-functional team that had never worked together before. So get this, this organization was very siloed and very segregated. So the security operations center, the analysts, they were the security analysts who built this report. They were literally behind a door, a locked door that you needed a special pass to get into. And the developers who worked on the software didn't even have access to them. So after learning about that and understanding that I need to get the people who understand the reports, who build the reports, connected with the people, the developers who were going to improve processes, we needed to break down these silos. So that was a big part of this too, this transparency of bringing these teams together and working together. And so there's the transparency of the teams working together, but there's also the transparency into the process of what it takes to build out a report. That the service design blueprint, I feel like surfaced like nothing else could. So is this something that you can do? I would say heck yes. It's very insightful to go into the steps of what a customer is trying to do and do a deep dive into each of those steps. Now, you can do it solo by yourself like I did. I was the only UX person working on this. Or you can have multiple people working on a service design blueprint. And I actually like that idea better. Bringing in collaborators is a great way to get others to own this service design blueprint with you, own this process, own the improvements. So you could bring in developers, product folks, you could even bring users and clients in to help you construct a service design blueprint. The more perspective you have, the better it will be at exploring all the angles of a problem. Now, you don't need any special tools. As you can see, I use paper stickies and markers and some screenshots. Maybe a whiteboard, maybe a spreadsheet. Now, I would, if I were doing this today, I would do this on a digital whiteboard. I just did not have one at the time. But the point is, you don't need any special tools to build this out. You also don't need any tech expertise. And what I mean by tech expertise is you don't have to know all the systems in and out for the developer, for you to build a service design blueprint. You don't need to be a tech expert. Believe me, I knew nothing about the systems that Bro Sales was using to build the report. But he explained enough to me to know what the system was and why he was using it, and that was enough. So for this, I not only talked to also I told you I interviewed customers, but I also talked to our internal security experts because I thought it was important to get both perspectives. There were things that security experts felt that customers needed to know. And so I needed that perspective too, to understand why they were putting this information into reports. And it was an opportunity to maybe teach the value of this information to our customers, which they didn't see. So I think that uncovering some of the low-hanging fruit, the automation, we're not going to automate the whole thing, but automating small bits and pieces, this low-hanging fruit is a great way to recommend improvements. You can do things like reduce time on task, reduce complexity, and suggest better processes. And so, yes, folks, the question is a service design blueprint for you? I would say a big fat yes. Whew. Now, I know we talked about a lot, but hopefully you can see the value of applying a different research methods and how you can create a service design blueprint for something that you might be working on. So my major takeaway for you today is it is okay to modify and evolve that traditional template of a service design blueprint. Do so to meet the needs that you have, your team's needs. As with all the work that we do, nothing is set in stone. We often hear in user experience, it depends, right? So feel free to adapt this excellent tool for your research needs. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Jen. It doesn't look like there's anything in the chat yet, so if anyone watching has any questions, please put them in the Zoom chat. But just to get the conversation started, I liked how you started with the sticky notes, then translated into a spreadsheet. Would you always recommend doing it that way, or like having a physical representation first, or do you think you can still get the same benefits starting in maybe a spreadsheet and moving around cells, or is there a difference, you think?
I would, like I mentioned, if given the choice to do it today, I would do it in a digital whiteboard because that is as accessible and it gives an opportunity to put the visuals, the screenshots right in there as well. So it, which was a little bit challenging in an Excel because it's hard to really get that in there in a nice, clean, modular way. So I would say, and a digital whiteboard is as flexible as moving paper stickies around. So that would be my suggestion, is that you could use a digital whiteboard. There's a lot of great tools. I'm sure most companies are using some form of a digital whiteboard these days. And so that, yeah, that's where I would suggest that you can, and you can clean it up to look like a pretty fine deliverable in the end.
Good. Thank you. Did when you were interviewing bro sales, did you have any like issues getting him to like take on your trust? Like you are someone who he's not typically working with, watching his processes. Was there any kind of like collaboration or friendship building that you had to kind of do in from the start for you to get the real results that you needed?
Sure. That's a good question. Yes, I was a UX researcher. I was not working in the security world. I didn't know what he was talking about. But as with any good researcher, right, you build a rapport. And I was sitting right next to him hours on end, multiple days. We built a rapport pretty quickly. I was lucky that he was a very friendly person, very accommodating, and very patient. And so I was asking a lot of questions. What are you doing? Why are you doing that? And he was not defensive about it. I'm like, look, I'm dumb. Treat me like I'm five, talk to me that way. I'm just here to learn and take screenshots of everything that you do along the way. And it was great. We still, even though we're no longer working at the same company, I still call him Bro Sales. We're still friends. And like I said, as with any good researcher, you do, that's a key critical skill, is to build that rapport and build that safe environment, and treat them as they are the expert. That apprentice and apprentice relationship, that's what we had. I'm here to learn from you. I don't know anything. And that usually kind of um, dissolves most like egos or, awkward dynamics. It's like, I don't know, help me out. And a lot of people are really welcoming and open to working that way.
Wonderful. Also with your interviews with the customer's point of view, was that on the phone, Zoom, Skype? Is there a method that you recommend being the most effective in getting the best client feedback?
That those happen to be over the phone, but I would say Zoom would have been effective because then one of us could have brought up the document and actually been looking at it at the same time.
Mm.
It was a PDF that we sent them, and so bringing up that document saying, "Oh, on this page," uh, and I could do that. I was on the phone and I bring up my computer. We were sharing it, but I think a rapport would have been a bit stronger had they seen me and I could see their reactions rather than just hearing it through the voice on the phone.
Right. And did you have a favorite part of this research process?
Favorite part. I am a huge fan of contextual inquiry. So sitting with bro sales and actually seeing things, seeing mistakes that he made, like he put in numbers and when he was writing scripts, and being like, oh, hey, you said you were doing this, but that number wasn't the same, and observing those hacks and those shortcuts and the things that they don't even realize that they're doing. You're like, wait, you said the next step was normally to go here, but you popped over here instead. Is this a unique case? And he's like, oh no, yeah, I guess I do this too, and I didn't realize that. You're never going to see that. You're never going to hear that in a post-event interview, right? So the goal there is to really see what they're doing and how, and because they might say, oh, I just copied this from Word, but what they're doing is they're copying it from Word, putting it into Excel and writing the script and coming out and then putting it back into a different place. And you're like, oh, wait, there were other things in between that you didn't mention that you did that I just saw you do. What's happening here? So seeing that firsthand is really gold.
Okay. All righty. I am not seeing any other questions popping up unless I'm missing a double check. I'm not seeing it. All right. Well, thank you so much for your presentation today and for everyone attending today's events. This was our last presentation of the day, so I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.